Hi, I'm Barry the Baron Rowland, and normally welcome you to the Baron's Lecture Series. The series, of course, is more formal and professorial, as you might say, and a little stuffy if you're not an administrator looking for ways and means of improving excellence in your schools, community groups, or businesses. From time to time, though, I'm going to do a 180-degree turn and talk to you about my own personal experiences as a school administrator. I guess I should call it Confessions of a School Administrator, Me. What I want to do is to share with you that my experience over 20 years, stories, some sad, some happy, some funny, some put into place to solve problems. And so that you get an idea that we were able to contain in terms of looking after kids and in their best interest. And I think kids appreciate it. So the first story I'm going to tell you is when I first became a school vice principal in a secondary school. This was a great school, a strong academic school. So when I went in there, full of viv and vigor, I asked the person I was replacing, "Why are there so many kids wandering around the halls here? Like, do you not have class?" Well, I was told that they had a policy that when a kid skipped 20 classes, and these kids basically were skipping, they dealt with that at that time. I said, 20 classes? Are you serious? That isn't going to happen. 20 classes, the kid's lost his year in that subject. Done, finished, kaput, over with. Fortunately, I had various colleagues across the Toronto area who had put in place a system that I loved. It was called an invalid absence system, and it pertained to school attendance. So we decided to put that in place with the staff on board. I don't know how happy the kids were, but we were going to put it in place. The system was pretty simply pen and paper system. We were on a computer, and it was horrible. People were bubbling cards, sending them in. They were late. They were missing. And they weren't exact, and they weren't accurate, and they weren't there when I wanted them. I wanted something that the very next day, or by the end of that day, I knew who was skipping class, and the next day we could deal with it. Not 20 days from now. So what we did was the home form teacher had a set of green cards on everybody in the home forum. And at 9 o'clock, whoever wasn't there, the cards came to the office and they were put on a sheet when we had 5 years of high school. So the sheets went from grade 9 to grade 13, listing people who weren't in attendance at homeroom. As the day went on, people signed in late, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. And they were then put on the sheet as signing in at a certain time. So if you signed in at 11 o'clock, obviously you weren't there for the first two couple of periods, and so on. And that went on throughout the day. Um, and so at the end of the day, the teachers had a simple sheet, 9 blank windows, because they all had 9 periods, 6 of 9. And I asked them simply, whoever's not in front of you sitting in that seat, put the name on and the form that they're in. And at the end of the day, drop a sheet off. Simple. They could write on it. It was very easy. A colleague who invested his time with me every single day, every single year I was there, we would gather the sheets and he and I would purge the list. So we had the list in front of us. We'd go through the list. Who was away all day? Who signed in? So we know they weren't there in these 2 periods. At the end of the day, we had an invalid absence list, basically showing people we couldn't account for. That went in the teacher's mailbox. And at 9 o'clock the next morning, following the announcements, anyone on that list, the home board teacher told them to go to the auditorium. They were on the list, and then the 9s and 10s would speak with me, and the 11s, 12s, and 13s with one of my colleagues. Most of the time, believe it or not, they were on the list in there, and it was a teacher who missed them or didn't put them down or whatever the case may be. And the kids were given a slip to go back to rectify it, and they went back angry. And they had words with the teacher. I didn't have to say a word to teachers about keeping attendance. The kids did it all. And there were some teachers who were great, and others were the same ones all the time who couldn't keep attendance. And they got ragged on by the kids constantly in terms of that. And so the reason they were so concerned is that we had a very tight policy. In grade 9 and 10, the first time you skipped, I dealt with you. The second time, a letter went home to your parents. And the third time, you went home for 3 days. And every time after that, you went home for 3 days. Interestingly enough, very few kids got to that point. And if they did, were willing to go home and be suspended rather than be in class, there was something going on in that class. And we could get them into guidance to find out, were they having trouble with the teacher? Was there an issue with not being able to do the work? What was it? Not 20 days from now, because that's unrecoverable in terms of that. And so, interestingly, parents would call me and say, well, yeah, you skipped a class and now you send them home for 3 days. I'd say, yeah, exactly. We want to hear in our terms. Can't have them coming in, disturbing the class, asking the teacher update what happened when he wasn't there, ask kids to give them their notes. Not fair. Not fair. So parents understood that. The senior kids, 11, 12, and 13, we gave them 3 skips a term, essentially. Never went beyond 3 before a letter went home and they went home. There were times when they had to go out and finish work. I understood that. And so, but they knew, we minimized the absenteeism in class. And although some of the kids were unhappy, most of the kids understood that we were doing it in their best interest. And kids, teenagers those that were in trouble would say to their friends, that SOB in the office, he's going to do this if I skip again. But in their heart of hearts, they don't want to skip again. But they needed an excuse. And that was me in the office. So that worked out okay. And the system lasted and worked well for as long as I was there, 4 years, I guess, before I became a principal. Interestingly enough, at the reunions, the kids who had the most difficulty in attendance were the kids that came to me and said, thank you for what you did. So it must have meant something to them at the time. And I was pleased with that. One of the things that is interesting is that in Toronto, many of the administrators, vice principals, and principals came from the physical education ranks. Department heads in phys ed, they could schedule, they knew how to get buses, they knew how to deal with kids, both formally and informally. They saw kids at their highest and they saw kids at their lowest. So they never had to react. There was nothing that would surprise them. And the kids knew that they liked and loved kids. And if you love kids, they understand and they get it. And they're quick at knowing if you don't like them. And that can be very, very difficult for a school administrator and a teacher in a classroom. So that's the story on my first off-the-cuff remarks. And I will say this, that when I left that school to be a principal, I had a standing ovation from the kids in the auditorium, a fairly extensive party to send me on my way. Vice principals don't get that. They're the bad guys, usually. So, there you have it. Confession of a School Administrator, number 1, and more to come.